Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile, the river sparkling like molten gold under the Egyptian sun. Among the reeds, a tiny basket floats, rocking gently. Inside is a baby, born under a death sentence, his life hanging by a thread. This child should have been lost to the waters, but he would grow to challenge a king, speak with God, and lead a nation to freedom. His name was Moses. Moses wasn't a warrior or a king. He was a boy raised in a palace, a man who fled his past, a leader who doubted his own voice. Yet one day, on a lonely mountain, he saw a bush burning with fire that didn't consume it. God's voice called him, and his world turned upside down. With nothing but faith, he faced the most powerful man on earth, parted a sea, and carved a path to liberty. He stumbled, he feared, but his courage changed history. This is a story of fear, faith, and freedom, a journey from a basket to a mountain. What can you learn from a man who trusted when the way was unclear? Whether you're learning English or chasing a dream, Moses' story will spark courage in you. Have you ever faced a moment when you had to take a leap of faith? Maybe it was a new job, a tough choice, or a dream you weren't sure you could reach. Moses' life shows that one yes can move mountains. Join us on this epic journey with English Awakens. Let's discover how a boy from the Nile became a legend. Are you ready? Chapter 1. A Baby in a Basket. In ancient Egypt, around 1300 BC, the Nile River was the heart of a mighty empire. Pyramids pierced the sky, and Pharaoh's palaces gleamed with gold. But for the Hebrew people, Egypt was a prison. They were slaves, forced to drag stones and build cities under the sting of whips. Their cries echoed through dusty work sites, their hands cracked from labor. Pharaoh feared their growing numbers. To crush their hope, he issued a cruel decree. Every newborn Hebrew boy must be thrown into the Nile to drown. In a small village by the river, a woman named Jochebed cradled her newborn son. His tiny fingers curled around hers, his eyes bright with life. She couldn't let him die. For 3 months, she hid him, hushing his cries when soldiers patrolled nearby. Every night she prayed, her voice a whisper in the dark. God, save my child. But hiding him forever was impossible. With trembling hands, she wove a basket from reeds, sealing it with pitch to keep it afloat. She kissed her baby, tears soaking her face, and placed him inside. She carried the basket to the Nile, setting it among the reeds. God, protect him, she whispered, her heart breaking. Jochebed's daughter Miriam hid in the bushes, watching with a pounding heart. Suddenly, a royal boat glided down the river. Pharaoh's daughter, bathing with her maids, spotted the basket. She opened it and gasped. The baby was crying, his tiny fists waving. Her heart softened. "This is a Hebrew child," she said, but she didn't turn away. She decided to keep him, cradling him gently. Miriam, bold and quick, stepped forward. "Shall I find a Hebrew woman to nurse him?" she asked. The princess nodded, and Miriam ran to fetch Jochebed. In a miracle, the mother who gave up her son became his nurse, paid by the palace to raise him. The princess named him Moses, meaning drawn from water. He grew up in the palace, surrounded by golden halls, fragrant gardens, and royal feasts. He wore fine linen, studied with Egypt's scholars, and walked among the powerful. But Jochebed had told him stories of his people, the Hebrews, enslaved and suffering. As a young man, Moses ventured to the work sites, seeing their pain. Their bent backs and weary eyes stirred something in him. He was torn, caught between the palace's glory and the slaves' cries. Was he a prince or a Hebrew? His heart wrestled, searching for his place. Have you ever felt caught between two worlds, unsure of who you're meant to be? Maybe you faced a choice: Follow the easy path or the one that feels true. Moses' story shows that even the smallest life, hidden in a basket, can hold a great purpose. God was already shaping a leader. What small moment in your life might be the start of something extraordinary? Chapter 2. The Prince Who Ran Away. Moses was a prince of Egypt, raised in luxury, but his heart was restless. Now in his 20s, he walked through the dusty work sites where Hebrews toiled under the blazing sun. One day, he saw an Egyptian guard beating a Hebrew slave. The man's cries cut through the air, pleading for mercy. Anger surged in Moses, hot and fierce. He looked around. No one was watching. In a flash, he struck the guard, killing him. He buried the body in the sand, his hands shaking, his breath uneven. He thought his secret was safe, but secrets don't stay buried. The next day, Moses tried to stop two Hebrews from fighting. One sneered, "Will you kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Fear gripped Moses. The truth was out. Pharaoh heard and ordered his death. The prince who had everything, gold, power, a future, was now a fugitive. He fled, leaving the Nile, the palace, and his old life behind. He ran to Midian, a desert land of dust and silence, far from Egypt's reach. In Midian, Moses collapsed by a well, his body exhausted, his future a blank. A group of girls came to water their sheep, but rough shepherds pushed them away. Moses stood, his strength returning. He drove off the men and helped the girls, drawing water for their flocks. Their father, Jethro, a priest of Midian, welcomed Moses into his home. Moses married Jethro's daughter, Zipporah, a woman with a warm smile and steady heart. They had two sons, Gershom and Eliezer. For 40 years, Moses lived as a shepherd, guiding sheep through rocky hills under endless stars. The desert was quiet, the nights cool. He found peace, but he carried the weight of his past, the Hebrews' cries, the blood on his hands. Moses thought his story was over. He wasn't a hero, just a man who ran. He walked the desert paths, his sandals worn, his dreams small. But God sees what we don't. Those quiet years weren't the end, they were preparation. Jethro taught him patience, Zipporah gave him love, and the desert shaped his soul. Have you ever felt like your life was stuck? Like your best days were behind you? Maybe you've walked away from a mistake, thinking it defined you. Moses' story shows that even in the wilderness, God is writing your next chapter. The prince who ran was about to hear a call that would change everything. Chapter 3. The Bush That Burned Without Fire. One ordinary day, Moses led his sheep across the rugged slopes of Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. The sun blazed, the air shimmered with heat. Suddenly, he saw something impossible, a bush engulfed in flames, but it didn't turn to ash. The fire danced, alive, unbroken, its light both beautiful and terrifying. Moses stepped closer, his heart pounding, his eyes wide. A voice echoed, deep and holy, shaking the ground. "Moses, Moses," it called, "take off your sandals, for this is holy ground." Moses froze, his breath shallow. The voice was God's. "I have seen my people suffering in Egypt," God said. "Their cries have reached me. I will free them, and you will lead them to a land flowing with milk and honey." Moses' knees trembled. Him? A runaway? A shepherd? He stammered, his voice weak. "Who am I to face Pharaoh? I'm nobody." God replied, "I will be with you." "This is my promise." Moses tried again, his fear spilling out. "I can't speak well, I stutter. People won't listen." God was gentle but firm. "Who made your mouth?" "Your brother Aaron will speak for you. Go." God revealed his name, a name like no other. "I am who I am. Tell them I am has sent you." The words burned into Moses' heart, heavy with power. He stood before the bush, his past flashing before him, killing a man, running away, living in hiding. Why him? He wasn't brave or eloquent, but the burning bush was more than a sign. It was a call to trust. God didn't need a perfect leader, just a willing heart. Moses took a shaky breath, his hands trembling. "Yes," he whispered, not because he felt ready, but because he believed. Moses returned to Jethro, sharing the vision. Jethro blessed him, and Zipporah prepared their sons for the journey. Moses set out for Egypt, his heart heavy but resolute. On the way, Aaron, his older brother, met him, their embrace warm after years apart. Together, they carried God's message. The man who fled in fear was now God's messenger, stepping toward a mission bigger than himself. Have you ever been called to something that scared you? Maybe a new challenge, a dream, or a change you didn't feel ready for. Moses shows us that courage isn't about feeling strong. It's about trusting enough to take the first step. One yes can light a path through the darkest doubts. Chapter 4. Let my people go. Moses and Aaron stood in Pharaoh's palace, its towering pillars and golden walls gleaming with power. The air was thick with tension, Pharaoh's throne radiating authority. Moses, now 80 years old, lifted his eyes. "The God of the Hebrews says, 'Let my people go to worship me in the desert,'" he declared. Pharaoh's eyes narrowed, his laugh cold and cruel. "Who is this God? I am Pharaoh, ruler of Egypt. Your people are my slaves." He refused, his heart hard as stone. To punish Moses, he made the Hebrews work brutal, forcing them to gather straw for bricks. The slaves groaned, their hands bleeding, their spirits crushed. Some turned on Moses, blaming him. "You've made our lives worse," they cried. Moses' heart sank, but he turned to God, praying under the stars. God sent 10 plagues to show his power, each one shaking Egypt's pride. Through Moses, the Nile turned to blood, its waters choking with red. Fish died, the air stank, and Egypt's lifeline failed. Frogs swarmed, leaping into homes and beds. Gnats and flies buzzed in thick clouds, tormenting the land. Livestock dropped dead, their bodies piling up. Boils scarred skin, hail shattered fields, and locusts devoured every green thing. Darkness fell for 3 days, so thick no one could move. Each time Pharaoh promised freedom, then hardened his heart, his pride unbroken. Moses stood firm, his faith a rock, even as Egypt crumbled under God's hand. The final plague was the most devastating. God warned that every firstborn in Egypt would die at midnight, but Hebrews who marked their doors with lamb's blood would be spared. Moses rallied his people, house by house, urging them to trust. They obeyed, their hands trembling as they painted their doorframes. At midnight, a wail rose across Egypt. Every home lost a son, from Pharaoh's heir to the poorest servant. Pharaoh, his face hollow with grief, summoned Moses. "Go," he said, his voice broken. "Take your people and leave." The Hebrews fled, nearly 600,000 strong, carrying unleavened bread, gold from their neighbors, and hearts pounding with hope. Moses led them, no longer a prince, but God's servant. The plagues had tested his resolve, each one a battle of faith. Have you ever stood up for something when the odds were against you? Maybe you fought for a cause, a dream, or a truth. Moses' fight for freedom shows that courage can break the strongest chains. His faith turned Pharaoh's no into a nation's go, leading them toward a promise of liberty. Chapter 5. The Sea That Opened. The Hebrews marched out of Egypt, a vast crowd stretching across the desert, men, women, children, and livestock, their sandals kicking up dust. They carried their few belongings, their hearts light with a taste of freedom. Moses led them, his staff in hand, his eyes fixed on the horizon. But Pharaoh's heart hardened once more. His chariots thundered after them, 600 strong, their swords flashing, hooves shaking the earth. The Hebrews reached the Red Sea, its waves crashing high, blocking their path. Behind them, the Egyptians closed in, their shouts growing louder. The people panicked, turning to Moses. "Why did you bring us here to die?" they cried. "We were better off as slaves!" Fear gripped them, and Moses felt its weight, his heart racing. He lifted his eyes to God, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Do not fear," he told the people. "Stand firm and see God's salvation today." He raised his staff over the sea as God commanded. A mighty wind roared, blowing through the night. Then, a miracle unfolded. The waters parted, rising like two towering walls, leaving a dry path through the sea. The Hebrews stood frozen, their eyes wide with awe. Moses waved them forward. "Go!" he shouted. They stepped onto the path, children clinging to parents, the ground solid beneath their feet. The sea loomed on both sides, its waters shimmering in the dawn, held back by an unseen hand. The Egyptians charged after them, chariots rattling, horses snorting. But God moved. The chariot wheels jammed, slowing their chase. Moses raised his staff again, and the waters collapsed, crashing over horses, soldiers, and chariots. Not one survived. The Hebrews reached the other side, their feet on dry land. They sang, their voices soaring with joy. Miriam, Moses' sister, led the women in dance, tambourines ringing, her voice lifting in praise. "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed." Moses looked at the calm sea, his heart full. God had kept his promise. This wasn't just a crossing, it was a rebirth. The Hebrews saw God's power, and Moses became their leader, not by might, but by faith. The sea was their first taste of true freedom, a moment that defined them. What's an impossible barrier in your life? Maybe it's a fear, a challenge, or a dream that feels out of reach. Moses' story shows that when you're trapped, trust can open a way. The sea parted because one man believed and a nation walked free. Chapter 6: Fire, Law, and a Golden Calf. Moses led the Hebrews to Mount Sinai, a rugged peak piercing the desert sky. God called him to the top, where fire and smoke swirled like a storm, the mountain trembling under God's presence. For 40 days, Moses stayed with God, receiving the 10 Commandments, laws carved on stone tablets to guide the people. "Love God with all your heart," they said. "Honor your parents. Do not steal, lie, or kill." These were God's words, a blueprint for a new nation. Moses held the tablets, his heart swelling with hope. He imagined his people living justly, free from Egypt's chains. But below, the people grew restless. Moses was gone too long, days, then weeks. Fear crept in. They forgot the God who parted the sea. They gathered gold, earrings, bracelets, necklaces, and melted it into a calf statue. "This is our God, who brought us out of Egypt," they shouted, dancing and feasting around the idol. Their laughter echoed, their hearts turning from the truth. When Moses descended, he saw the golden calf gleaming, the people lost in worship. His heart shattered. These were the people he'd fought for, freed from slavery, now betraying their deliverer. In fury, he smashed the tablets, the stone breaking on the ground. He burned the calf, ground it to dust, and scattered it in water. "Why?" he asked the people, his voice trembling with pain and anger. Moses confronted Aaron, who had let it happen. "They pressured me," Aaron said, his head bowed. Moses turned to the people, calling those still faithful to stand with him. The tribe of Levi rallied, and order was restored, but not without cost. Moses climbed Sinai again, falling before God. "Forgive them," he pleaded, his voice raw. "If you won't, erase my name from your book." His love for his people was stronger than his anger, his heart breaking for their failure. God listened, commanding Moses to carve new tablets. God wrote the laws again, renewing the covenant. Moses returned, his face glowing from God's presence, so bright he wore a veil. The people saw and believed once more. He taught them the laws, building a nation rooted in faith. Leading is never easy. Moses could have walked away, but he chose forgiveness, fighting for his people. Have you ever had to forgive someone who broke your trust? Maybe a friend, a colleague, or even yourself. Moses shows that true leadership lifts others up, even when they fall. His love turned a broken people into a nation with a future. Chapter 7. A leader who trusted until the end. For 40 years, Moses led the Hebrews through the desert's heat and dust. They were free, but the journey was grueling. The sun scorched their skin, water was scarce, and food ran low. The people complained, their voices sharp and bitter. "Why did you bring us here to starve?" they cried. "We had food in Egypt, even as slaves." Some rebelled, challenging Moses' leadership. Others doubted God, their faith crumbling like dry sand. Moses grew weary, his shoulders heavy with the weight of a nation. Yet he never stopped. He spoke to God face to face like a friend, pouring out his heart in prayer under starry skies. God provided for the people, sending manna, bread from heaven, each morning, and quail for meat. When they thirsted, God brought water from rocks. Once, when the people grumbled, poisonous snakes bit them, and many died. Moses prayed, and God told him to make a bronze snake and lift it on a pole. Those who looked at it were healed, a sign of God's mercy. But the people's complaints continued, testing Moses' patience. He was human, and the burden was heavy. At Meribah, the people begged for water again. God told Moses to speak to a rock, and water would flow. Frustrated by their endless doubts, Moses struck the rock twice with his staff instead. Water gushed out, quenching the people's thirst, but God spoke sternly. "Because you did not trust me to show my holiness, you will not enter the promised land." Moses' heart sank. He was 120 years old, his life poured out for this people, facing Pharaoh, parting the sea, carrying their burdens. The land of milk and honey, so close, would not be his. Yet he didn't argue or despair. He bowed his head, accepting God's will, and kept leading. Moses taught the people God's laws, preparing them for their future. He wrote down the Torah, the foundation of their faith, and appointed Joshua, a young warrior, to lead them into the land. His voice, once hesitant, now carried wisdom. He blessed each tribe, his words full of hope. Then, with steady steps, Moses climbed Mount Nebo, his eyes still sharp despite his age. From the peak, he saw the promised land. Green hills rolling under a golden sky, rivers flowing, a future for his people. His eyes filled with tears, not of regret, but of peace. He had done what God asked. The people would go on, carrying his work forward, led by Joshua. Moses died on Nebo, his mission complete. The Bible says God buried him, and no one knows his grave. He wasn't perfect. He doubted, he stumbled, he ran. But he trusted, step by step, through fear and failure. His faith freed a nation, his laws shaped history, his story echoed through time. From a basket on the Nile to a mountain overlooking the future, Moses showed that one life, lived with courage, can change the world. What's a dream you're chasing, even if it feels out of reach? Maybe it's learning a new skill, starting a business, or rebuilding after a setback. Moses' story teaches us that faith can grow from fear, and one act of courage can build a legacy. You don't need to see the finish line to make a difference. Just keep walking, trusting the path will open. Thank you for joining English Awakens on this epic journey. Want more of Moses' story? Check the video below and subscribe to boost your English and spark your courage. Share this with someone who needs a push forward today. Let's keep learning, growing, and dreaming together.